Welcome, radiant souls, to Golden Fortune Leo, the sanctuary of cosmic confidence and timeless insight. Here, pride is not a sin, it's the signature of a heart that remembers its own worth. I'm your longtime researcher, part astrologer, part psychologist, part storyteller who still believes that even the stars keep diaries of our emotional evolution. If you've stumbled upon this corner of the internet today, it isn't random. The universe has a way of whispering to those ready to hear, and Leo, today it's whispering to you. Our theme is not merely love, it's the secret they don't want you to know. The secret that they are terrified because you, dear Leo, are too good to be true. This is your chapter in the year of triumph 2025, the year where you stop asking for permission to shine. Now, let's talk about the truth that most people can't handle. Your light intimidates them. You don't even try, it just happens. When a healed Leo walks into the room, it's like the sun itself decided to attend the meeting. You stand tall, unbothered, self-aware, and that energy unsettles anyone still hiding behind illusions. Some call you intimidating, but that's only because your authenticity makes their disguise itch. They smile and say you're too good to be true, but what they really mean is that your balance of strength and compassion challenges their comfort. You've stopped performing for approval, stopped rescuing people from the consequences of their own immaturity. You've learned that peace is more seductive than chaos, and that terrifies those who once thrived on your attention. Someone from your past, the one who never quite knew what to do with your loyalty, is still lingering in the shadows, pretending they're fine. They're not. They're unsettled, confused, pacing in emotional circles because the gravitational pull of your warmth is gone. They used to depend on your forgiveness the way night depends on dawn. But something shifted. You stopped apologizing for being too much and realized they were simply too little. And now, stripped of your light, they are forced to face their reflection in the dark. You've become the mirror they can't break and can't look away from. Leo, the truth is, they were never afraid of losing you, they were afraid of you realizing you never needed them. The balance of power has reversed. You used to explain yourself endlessly, trying to make them understand your love language, your boundaries, your needs. Now, silence is your message, and they finally understand it. That silence, that dignified absence of reaction, is your most poetic form of revenge. It's not anger that haunts them, it's your indifference. You've outgrown the drama, and that's the most threatening thing of all. People often misunderstand Leo's confidence. They call it ego because they mistake humility for self-doubt. But Leo doesn't shine to show off, Leo shines because it's their nature. Just as the sun cannot apologize for sunrise, you cannot apologize for existing brightly. When you love with full daylight. When you leave with dignity. You've learned that real strength isn't loud, it's knowing when to walk away quietly. Somewhere deep inside, your soul finally whispered, enough, and that whisper became thunder. Now they're chasing. They send messages, reappear in small ways, trying to bargain for a role in your story they already exited. They promise they've changed, but you can feel it, it's not growth, it's fear. They don't want to lose the version of themselves they once were when standing next to you. But you've evolved beyond that script. You've learned the Buddhist truth that attachment is the root of suffering, and freedom is the fruit of awareness. You are no longer interested in fixing people who mistake comfort for love. Instead, you've shifted your focus inward, where your peace blooms quietly like sunlight through morning clouds. And yes, it's funny when you think about it. The moment you stop chasing, everyone suddenly remembers your worth. The same people who dismissed your generosity now call you mysterious. The ones who said you were too emotional are now wondering why you're so calm. That's universal humor, the cosmic joke that plays every time a Leo decides to heal instead of seek validation. The universe adores irony, and your glow-up has become its favorite punchline. But here's the deeper lesson, the one you were meant to learn in this year of triumph 2025. Your strength doesn't come from being loved by others, it comes from staying loyal to your own light. This year isn't about revenge or recognition, it's about realization. You've discovered that independence isn't loneliness, it's liberation. You no longer need applause to know you've done well. You no longer measure love by how much chaos you endure. You've outgrown the old currency of affection, where pain was proof of passion. Now, your love language is peace, stability, laughter that doesn't feel like negotiation. So yes, they're scared. They should be. Not because you're cruel, but because you're awake. You've remembered your worth and stopped renting it out for validation. You're the lion who has learned that silence can roar louder than words. And when you walk away, it's not a threat, it's a prophecy. You've become living proof that self-respect is the highest form of love. As you move through the rest of 2025, remember that not everyone deserves front row seats to your rebirth. Some will only understand your worth when they can no longer reach you. Let that be their lesson, not your burden. You don't owe closure to those who thrived on your confusion. You owe consistency to your peace. Because once a Leo stands in their truth, even the stars pause to listen. So, dear Leo, lift your head high. Your story is not one of heartbreak, it's one of transformation. You didn't lose them, you found yourself. And in this year of triumph 2025, that's the real secret they don't want you to know. You are too good to be manipulated, too wise to be fooled, and too radiant to be forgotten. Let them wonder. Let them miss the sunlight they once took for granted. The truth is, you were never too good to be true, they were simply too blind to believe in something that real. Let's step into the deeper mechanics of what's really happening here, Leo, the anatomy of a power shift. When we talk about astrology, we aren't just talking about planets and personalities, we're talking about the architecture of the soul. Leo, as a fixed fire sign ruled by the sun, represents the most stable form of illumination in the zodiac. You're not just light, you're the constant source of it. Your presence doesn't simply brighten a room, it reveals it. And therein lies both your gift and your curse. People think they want honesty until your sunlight exposes the dust they've been ignoring for years. You make people see themselves, and that can be a spiritual earthquake for those who have lived comfortably in denial. When your warmth touches someone who's emotionally frozen, it doesn't heal them immediately, it melts the protective ice they've mistaken for identity. And as that mask dissolves, they panic. They don't thank you for your light, they blame you for their discomfort. They say you're too much, but that's only because they've forgotten what real warmth feels like. This is the irony of being a Leo. The same people who are drawn to your energy are often the ones least equipped to handle it. They crave the light but fear the exposure. They love the comfort of your fire but resent how it demands truth. It's like moths flying into a candle flame, they mistake illumination for safety until it burns away their illusions. When you find yourself entangled with someone addicted to control, the power dynamic becomes a slow leak of your vitality. They call it love, but what they really want is custody of your light. They take from you emotionally, financially, spiritually, until you start to feel like the manager of their moods instead of the partner in their growth. They disguise dependency as passion and cling to you under the illusion of devotion. But true love doesn't suffocate, it breathes. In psychology, we'd call this a codependent loop. One person fears abandonment, the other fears disappointment, and both end up trapped in a dance where no one really leads. In Buddhist philosophy, it's even simpler, it's tanha, craving born from fear. They didn't want partnership, they wanted possession. They weren't in love with you, they were in love with how your energy made them feel about themselves. And as long as you kept feeding them that sense of importance, they felt alive. But when you started to evolve, when you stopped apologizing for your needs and reclaimed your self-worth, their illusion cracked. You stopped being the supplier of their self-esteem, and suddenly, they felt empty. Here's the cosmic punchline: you weren't just their lover, you were their teacher. Karma is funny that way, it disguises lessons as relationships. You arrived not to fix them, but to reflect them. You came into their life to show them the gap between who they pretend to be and who they really are. And that's the thing about divine mirrors, they never lie. Unfortunately, most people fail their spiritual midterms. Instead of evolving, they cling. Instead of listening, they chase. They mistake the withdrawal of your energy as punishment, not realization. They don't understand that your absence is the final lesson, the universe's way of saying, "Class dismissed." Now they're running after you, desperate to plug back into the energy source that once powered their emotional universe. You were their sun, they were just revolving planets. When you unplugged, their entire system went dark. They didn't lose a partner, they lost their electricity. And that's the secret they'll never admit: they need you more than you ever needed them. But that's the beautiful paradox of Leo's love, it teaches even when it ends. Now, let's talk about you, the chosen ones of this timeline. Yes, I said it, the chosen ones. Not because you're perfect, but because you have the courage to evolve publicly, to rise from embarrassment, heartbreak, and loss with dignity still intact. You've been humiliated, underestimated, maybe even betrayed, but you didn't collapse. You turned pain into perspective, and perspective into power. In the year of triumph 2025, that isn't survival, it's graduation. You've earned a PhD in self-awareness. The universe is handing you a diploma written in starlight. Congratulations, you've completed the lesson on self-worth. And here's where the divine comedy continues. While they're busy wondering how you've managed to glow without them, the universe is slipping you into protection mode. That cobweb energy some people fear isn't a trap, it's insulation. You're being wrapped in spiritual bubble wrap, protected from the vibrations of people still stuck in their lower frequency dramas. Every ghosted text, every silent treatment, every rejection was never rejection, it was redirection. The sound you hear now isn't chaos, it's the echo of egos collapsing. While they spiral in confusion, you're rediscovering something they never understood: playfulness. You're laughing again. You're dancing in your kitchen, smiling at your own reflection, saying things like, "I didn't survive all that just to be bitter." You've remembered that joy isn't earned, it's your birthright. You've remembered that self-love isn't arrogance, it's alignment. Your heart, once heavy, now feels lighter, not because the past disappeared, but because you stopped dragging it into the present. You've forgiven not for them, but for yourself, because you finally understand that forgiveness is just emotional detox, it cleanses your soul of stories that no longer serve. And that, Leo, is your true roar. Not the loud one people expect, but the quiet one, the vibration that hums beneath your calm exterior. The roar of a lion who knows their strength and doesn't need to prove it. The roar of someone who chooses peace over performance, purpose over approval. The frequency of freedom. You are no longer here to convince anyone of your value. You've become your own validation, your own source of light. The sun doesn't ask for permission to rise, and neither should you. So as you walk forward in this year of triumph 2025, remember that the power shift isn't about dominance, it's about detachment. You've moved from seeking to embodying, from explaining to existing. And that, my dear Leo, is why they're scared. Because you've become untouchable not through distance, but through self-mastery. You're the lion who learned to stop roaring for attention and started shining from truth. And when the world finally catches up to that frequency, they'll call it divine timing. You'll just call it Tuesday. Love, for Leo, is never just a tender affair, it's a battlefield of egos disguised as devotion. You've never been the type to love halfway. When you love with the full force of the sun, with generosity that could power a small civilization. But the truth is, not everyone can handle that kind of energy. You fell for someone who wanted your loyalty but not your leadership, who adored your warmth but feared your fire. You gave them your devotion, your consistency, your unshakable belief that love could conquer their immaturity, and in return, they handed you a stack of excuses wrapped in sweet words. You paid the emotional rent, the spiritual bills, and if we were being honest, maybe even the Wi-Fi. They basked in the palace of your love but somehow forgot to help you build it. That's not partnership, that's squatting in someone else's light. It's a pattern Leos know all too well. You attract people who mistake your generosity for an unlimited resource. You give and give until your light starts flickering, until you realize that the sun itself burns just to keep the universe warm. People forget that the radiance they adore is costly. But every Leo has a threshold, that sacred breaking point when your soul simply says, no more. The no doesn't come from anger, it comes from evolution. It's wisdom with teeth. It's that moment when you stop explaining why you deserve reciprocity and start embodying it instead. That's the point where the balance of power shifts forever. They thought you would always chase, always fix, always forgive. But instead of breaking down, you built wings. Instead of sinking into the drama, you rose above it. That's when panic sets in for them, not for you. Because now you're unreachable. You've evolved into an altitude where manipulation can't breathe. In the language of Buddhist psychology, this is compassion in motion. Detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's choosing not to participate in your own suffering anymore. You're no longer the therapist for emotional freeloaders or the translator for people who refuse to learn your language of love. You've realized that helping someone who won't help themselves isn't kindness, it's an addiction to control disguised as care. You've learned that saving someone who refuses to grow doesn't make you noble, it makes you exhausted. And so, you stopped. That simple, quiet act of walking away became your greatest act of spiritual rebellion. And yet, as the story unfolds, another theme surfaces: materialism and the mirage of love. The person you were dealing with seems obsessed with the external, appearances, luxury, the illusion of perfection. They wear designer clothes to hide the poverty of self-worth. They decorate emptiness and call it confidence. But you, Leo, are learning the opposite lesson, that real luxury isn't found in the sparkle of possessions, but in the serenity of peace. You've discovered that abundance isn't about accumulation, it's about permission. Permission to rest, to receive, to say no without guilt. True wealth is waking up without anxiety, laughing without calculation, and loving without debt. Meanwhile, they're still bargaining. Please don't go, they plead. Please help me. But love isn't a rescue mission, and you are not the Red Cross for broken adults. Your empathy is a gift, but when you give it without boundaries, it becomes self-betrayal. You've finally understood that being endlessly forgiving doesn't make you enlightened, it makes you a target for people allergic to accountability. You've stopped being the emotional ATM for those who only know how to withdraw. The universe took note of this upgrade in your consciousness, and that's why the year of triumph 2025 is aligning in your favor emotionally, financially, spiritually. Because the divine doesn't reward overextension, it rewards balance. You've passed the hardest exam, choosing dignity over dependency. Now, let's pause for a little cosmic humor, because if there's one sign that can find laughter in heartbreak, it's you, Leo. Picture it, your ex pacing the living room like a cat locked out of heaven, crafting apology texts they'll never have the courage to send, scrolling through your old photos like a historian studying a lost civilization. Tragic? Absolutely. But admit it just a little funny, too. Because deep down, you understand the divine irony of it all. The moment you stop begging for love, everyone suddenly remembers your number. The second you start prioritizing peace, chaos sends you a "Hey stranger" message. That's not random, it's spiritual physics. When you vibrate higher, everything unhealed in your orbit starts rattling. You've become living proof that evolution is disruptive. So when they reappear, hat in hand and regret in their eyes, don't see it as punishment or pity. See it as confirmation. You've become the mirror they can't escape. They're not chasing your attention, they're chasing the version of themselves that once existed in your reflection. They miss the way they felt when your love made them feel worthy, not realizing that feeling was never yours to give, it was theirs to maintain. And this, Leo, is where your wisdom shines. You no longer confuse love with labor. You understand that compassion without clarity becomes chaos. You know now that not every apology deserves an audience and not every past connection deserves a sequel. You've learned to let closure arrive in silence. You've turned your heartbreak into your curriculum, your solitude into your sanctuary. That's what it means to mature under the sun, to burn away illusion and stand bare in truth. The universe, ever the comedian, has been teaching you that letting go isn't losing, it's levitating. When you stop forcing the story, the plot starts writing itself. The people meant for you won't need to be convinced, they'll arrive already fluent in the language of respect. And that's what the year of triumph 2025 is setting up for you, not a reunion with your past, but a coronation for your present self. So laugh, Leo. Laugh at the chaos that tried to cage you, laugh at the fear that told you love had to hurt to be real. Laugh because you finally understand that heartbreak is not the opposite of love, it's the byproduct of loving without boundaries. The battlefield is quiet now, and you stand at its center, not as a survivor, but as a sovereign. You've turned pain into wisdom, ego into enlightenment, and longing into light. And maybe that's the punchline of it all, you were never fighting for love, you were fighting to remember that you already are it. Letting go, Leo, is one of the hardest sciences of the soul. People often mistake it for surrender, for weakness, for indifference, but those who think that have never understood the architecture of true strength. You see, Leo energy is loyal by nature, a loyalty so deep it can border on self-sacrifice. But what begins as devotion can easily turn into a gilded cage, and even gold, when it traps you, loses its luster. You are the lion, not a museum exhibit behind emotional glass. And yet, for too long, you stayed, analyzing every inch of the relationship like an archaeologist searching for lost meaning. You asked yourself the usual questions: could I have done more? Did I give up too soon? What if I'd just waited one more month? But the truth, dear Leo, is you didn't give up, you woke up. You realized that love without reciprocity is spiritual bankruptcy. You realized that staying too long in the wrong energy doesn't make you devoted, it makes you depleted. Sometimes the universe doesn't remove people to punish you, but to protect your evolution. Sometimes the departure of another is the divine's way of saving you from the smallness you were about to accept. When you stop enabling dysfunction, you become the living embodiment of karma, the lesson they didn't want but needed. That's why they're angry. Your peace is their punishment. Your silence is the loudest sermon they'll ever hear. Because there's nothing more unsettling to someone who once thrived on your attention than realizing you've found joy that doesn't include them. It isn't revenge, it's the natural consequence of spiritual balance. The cards showed exhaustion, imbalance, and that unmistakable heaviness of someone who's been carrying more than their share of emotional weight. It's not your imagination, you've been soaking in other people's chaos like a sponge. But the time has come to wring it out. Your healing now doesn't come from conversations or closures, it comes from quiet. Meditation, solitude, creativity, even laughter, these are your medicine. You don't owe anyone access to your energy while you rebuild your empire. In fact, isolation, for a Leo, isn't loneliness, it's recalibration. Think of it as spiritual hibernation before the next season of blooming. And if you've been secretly wondering whether the universe approves of your detachment, The answer is a roaring yes. The divine isn't asking you to fix anyone anymore, it's asking you to honor the lesson. They were a chapter, not the conclusion. Now, let's talk about the lessons from the shadow of the sun. When major arcana cards appear reversed, the sun, the star, the empress, the devil, it doesn't signal disaster, it signals a solar eclipse of the soul. The light hasn't disappeared, it's simply shifting its focus inward. You've been through what I'd call a solar reset, a recalibration of purpose. The universe dimmed the lights on purpose, so you could finally see who was only clapping when it was bright. That's the sacred irony of Leo's journey. You attract everyone when you're shining, but only the true ones stay when you're healing. Your shadow, Leo, has always been tied to the need for admiration. You don't crave attention because you're vain, you crave it because once upon a time, attention meant safety. Somewhere in childhood, you learned that love had to be earned, that validation was the gateway to belonging. But 2025 arrives as your year of emancipation from that illusion. This year's spiritual contract is written in bold ink: I don't need applause to be valuable. You're not chasing validation anymore, you're re-embodying it. And that single energetic shift changes everything. People who once drained you now find you intimidating, not because you've grown colder, but because you've grown clearer. You no longer dim your brilliance to make others comfortable. You've learned that playing small isn't humility, it's self-erasure. And yes, some will whisper that you've become distant, cold, or arrogant. Let them. The sun doesn't apologize for shining simply because someone else prefers the shade. Then there's the matter of the friend, the mirror, and the lesson. For some of you, this wasn't even about romance. It was about a friend, a boss, a parent, someone who decided they knew what was best for you, someone who inserted their judgments into your peace. They flung their opinions like darts disguised as advice: you're too much, you expect too much, you're so hard to please. But those weren't reflections of you, they were confessions of their own limitations. They weren't criticizing your standards, they were admitting they couldn't meet them. Every Leo must learn this difficult truth: not every admirer is an ally. Some people orbit your light not to celebrate it, but to stay warm. And when you stop feeding their ego, they call you selfish. But that's projection, not prophecy. Boundaries look like betrayal to people who benefited from your lack of them. This is where your maturity shines most clearly. You don't need to retaliate or defend yourself anymore. The wise lion doesn't roar at every hyena that laughs, it simply stands taller, knowing the sound of its silence carries farther than any noise. You've stopped seeking justice through reaction. You've found peace in stillness, and that is a sign of evolution few ever reach. Now let's zoom out to the grander view: your destiny under the year of triumph 2025. This is not a season of repetition, it's a season of rewriting. You are crossing the bridge between survival and sovereignty. You are remembering that your crown was never given, it was always inherited. 2025 is your cosmic reminder that leadership isn't about control, it's about self-command. The full moons will act as checkpoints along your path, moments of illumination where decisions once delayed will suddenly crystallize. For some, apologies will come like rain after drought, long awaited but not necessarily needed. For others, closure will arrive in silence, soft but final. Both are blessings, just delivered in different packaging. The universe is meticulous in its timing. It doesn't operate on human schedules, it works on soul seasons. Your guides, the so-called ascended masters, are orchestrating this like a symphony, and even the missed calls, the rejections, the disappointments are part of the melody. Nothing was wasted. Every heartbreak was a chord struck for your awakening. So when nostalgia tempts you to look back, remember, lions don't chase gazelles that already died in last season's hunt. In essence, letting go has become your initiation into freedom. It's the science of balance, the art of remembering that surrender isn't defeat, it's faith in motion. You're not just surviving this season, you're transcending it. You've learned that the lion doesn't roar to prove it's powerful, it roars to remind the jungle that silence was a choice. And now, Leo, your silence has spoken volumes. It has said, without words, I have evolved. Forgiveness, for Leo, is not a spiritual discount or a cosmic clearance sale, it's a graduation. It's not about letting anyone back into your orbit, it's about freeing yourself from the gravitational pull of what no longer serves your growth. To forgive doesn't mean to forget, it means to release the emotional charge, the weight that kept your heart in orbit around an old wound. You're not pretending the pain didn't happen, you're simply refusing to keep paying interest on a debt that the universe already wrote off. In the language of karma, this isn't revenge, it's evolution. Karma doesn't punish, it repeats. It loops the same lesson until awareness breaks the cycle. You, Leo, have already learned what you needed to. There's no extra credit for taking the same painful class twice. You've graduated from trying to fix what was never yours to repair. Your compassion, noble as it is, can easily masquerade as obligation. You've always had that heroic streak, that instinct to rescue, to nurture, to heal. But spiritual maturity is realizing that not every soul is your assignment. Their healing isn't your homework, no matter how much you love them. Sometimes the kindest act isn't one of comfort, it's one of distance. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let the absence of your warmth be the mirror that forces self-reflection. When you stop cushioning someone from the consequences of their actions, you stop being their accomplice in delay. That's compassion with boundaries, the only kind that truly heals. And remember, Leo, your greatest power has never been your roar, it's your restraint. True Leo energy is majestic quiet. It's knowing you could burn down the entire forest with one decision, but choosing instead to walk away and rebuild elsewhere. That's what I call spiritual royalty, the ability to hold fire without needing to prove it burns. Your silence is not weakness, it's sovereignty. It's the moment the jungle holds its breath because the lion has chosen peace. Now, because you're Leo and the cosmos has a sense of humor, we have to talk about the comedy of divine timing. The universe, as it turns out, is a stand-up comedian with impeccable timing. Just when you've deleted their number, Spotify, or let's be honest, some nosy algorithm suggests their playlist. Just when you've made peace with being single, Mercury retrograde decides it's open mic night for your exes. Don't roll your eyes, laugh. This is the universe testing your emotional Wi-Fi connection. Are you still logged into the old network of nostalgia, or have you upgraded to the high-frequency bandwidth of self-worth? Spoiler, you've upgraded. Your glow-up isn't accidental, it's divine strategy. Every heartbreak was part of a curriculum designed to teach emotional intelligence. Every betrayal was an unpaid internship in discernment. Every delay was a weightlifting session for your patience muscle. You've turned pain into intuition, disappointment into discernment, and self-doubt into confidence. You've become unrecognizable to your past self in the most glorious way possible. So when someone says you're too good to be true, smile and agree. You worked too hard to be average. The final revelation, Leo, is deceptively simple yet profoundly freeing. You are the sun, not a spotlight. Spotlights can be turned on or off depending on who holds the switch, but the sun doesn't wait for permission. It shines because it must. That's the cosmic lesson this entire relationship, this entire season, was designed to teach you. You were never meant to compete for attention, you were meant to remember your inherent radiance. The people who couldn't handle your light were never villains, they were catalysts. They pushed you toward solitude, but that solitude became your sanctuary. They mistook your boundaries for arrogance, but those boundaries became your altar. They tried to silence your roar, but it only taught you how to speak truth without words. Under the energy of 2025, the year of triumph, fury being told by the universe, you've done enough. You don't have to prove your goodness, fix anyone's wounds, or chase validation. You only have to shine consistently, courageously, and unapologetically. The right people will adjust their eyes. Those who complain about the brightness were never meant to walk beside you in daylight. And now we arrive at the curtain call, the closing reflection. Think of this not just as the end of a reading but as a renewal of your sovereignty. This is both prophecy and permission. Prophecy that peace is already on its way to you, and permission to stop earning what you already are worthy. The months ahead will bring new connections that mirror your growth, not your wounds, opportunities that match your vibration, not your desperation, and joy that doesn't demand self-sacrifice as its entrance fee. When the ghosts of the past come knocking, as they inevitably will, remember that not every soul is meant to accompany you into your rebirth. Some will appear not to reconcile but to remind you of how far you've come. You can bless them from afar without stepping back into their storm. The lion doesn't fear the storm, the lion is the storm. Controlled, majestic, untouchable. This is your season of trust, not trial. The universe isn't testing you anymore, it's trusting you. Trusting that you'll no longer shrink yourself for comfort, that you'll no longer confuse compassion with compliance. You've earned this serenity, this quiet power, this calm confidence that no longer needs an audience. And for those who still doubt your transformation, let them. Truth doesn't need witnesses, it needs consistency. You, Leo, are the living proof that light survives every eclipse. You are the sunrise that follows your own darkness. And that, my dear lion, is the secret they don't want you to know. You were never too much. You were always the measure. So go out and live with that truth. Celebrate it. Laugh at the divine humor of your own journey. Let life surprise you with beauty instead of battles. Let love find you when you're not looking for it, and let joy move through you like sunlight through glass. Because you've already passed the test, the rest is just applause. If today's reflection resonated with you, share this light with others. Like, share, and subscribe to Golden Fortune Leo, your cosmic home for truth, humor, and a little spiritual rebellion. Remember, the universe doesn't make mistakes, it makes masterpieces. And Leo, you're one of them.